June 21, 1941. Night presses down over East Prussia. Inside a lamplit headquarters near Rastenburg, Wilhelm Keitel does not sleep. The Field Marshal Hitler's most obedient soldier stands alone over a map that stretches from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Tomorrow, the German army will launch the largest invasion in human history. Operation Barbarossa. 3 million men. Keitel knows the numbers by heart. He has signed the orders himself. Keitel is not a battlefield commander. Tonight, he is something far more dangerous. The man who turns Hitler's will into military law. As chief of the OKW, every criminal directive, every ruthless instruction, passes through his hands. He tells himself he is a soldier following orders. But in this silence, the excuses feel thin. At 2 o'clock hours, engines begin to rumble. Columns of Panzer III and IV tanks move into attack positions. Infantry divisions fix bayonets. Artillery crews load shells stamped with eagles and swastikas. Keitel steps outside. The air smells of fuel and wet grass. He hears the Wehrmacht breathing, waiting. Keitel remembers another night. Years earlier, 1938, when Hitler promoted him despite warnings from senior generals. "You are my loyal Keitel," Hitler said. "Loyalty, or brilliance, is what brought him here. Loyalty is what keeps him standing now, watching the eastern sky." At 3:15, the first guns fire. The Soviet border explodes in light. Keitel does not cheer. He does not pray. He turns back inside and begins receiving reports. Army Group North advances toward Leningrad. Army Group Center drives for Minsk. Army Group South pushes into Ukraine. The invasion unfolds exactly as planned, too perfectly. By dawn, Luftwaffe bombers dominate the sky. Soviet airfields burn. Entire divisions are caught asleep. Keitel signs fresh orders as messengers rush in and out. Among them are directives that go beyond war orders for summary executions. For political commissars to be shot on sight. Keitel hesitates only a second before signing. His pen does not shake. As the days pass, reports grow darker. Roads clog with prisoners. Villages are erased. Keitel reads casualty lists while eating cold meals in the Wolf's Lair. He writes letters home in the evenings. Careful, restrained, never mentioning the screams, the smoke, the mass graves. At night, he tells himself, history will understand. But history is already forming in the mud outside Smolensk, where Soviet resistance stiffens. The easy victory Keitel promised Hitler begins to slow. Supplies lag. Tanks break down. Red Army counterattacks hit exposed flanks. Keitel receives the first troubling word. This war will not end quickly. On July 10, 1941, Keitel walks into Hitler's briefing room with bad news. The Führer's eyes harden. Maps are slammed onto tables. Blame begins to circulate. Keitel stands silent, absorbing it all. He will not contradict. He never does. Outside, the Eastern Front stretches endlessly. The war Keitel helped unleash is no longer. The maps do not lie, but they no longer reassure. By late July 1941, the arrows that once swept confidently east now hesitate. Wilhelm Keitel watches the red pins multiply along the front. Soviet resistance, battered but unbroken, hardens around Smolensk. Hitler demands speed. Keitel delivers the demand without comment, transmitting orders that ignore distance, fuel, and exhaustion. Inside the Wolf's Lair, Keitel's private routine settles into something mechanical. Briefing, signing silence. He eats quickly, sleeps lightly, and avoids mirrors. His uniform remains immaculate, but the man inside it is fraying. Reports arrive describing executions carried out under the Commissar order, men shot beside ditches. Names never recorded. Keitel reads every line. He files them away. Obedience, he reminds himself, is not choice. On August 6, Hitler explodes. Generals argue for a push toward Moscow. Hitler insists on turning south, toward Kiev. Keitel stands beside him, hands clasped behind his back, absorbing the fury. He knows the army is stretched thin. He also knows he will not resist. When Hitler dictates the diversion order, Keitel signs it that same night. Army Group Center halts. Momentum bleeds away. Far from headquarters, the consequences unfold immediately. Tank crews sit idle as engines cool. Soviet forces regroup. Counterblows slam into exposed German infantry. Keitel receives casualty figures that climb by the hour. He does not share his doubts. His role is not to question, only to transmit. Privately, letters from home go unanswered. Keitel's wife writes of rationing, their children asking when the war will end. He drafts replies, then burns them. Words feel dangerous now. Everything he puts on paper becomes evidence, if not today, then someday. By September, Kiev falls in a massive encirclement. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet prisoners are taken. Hitler celebrates. Keitel stands nearby, applauding on cue. Yet even victory carries rot. Logistics collapse under the weight of prisoners and ruined infrastructure. Autumn rains begin. Roads dissolve into mud. Trucks sink axle deep. Keitel studies photographs of immobilized columns and feels a cold certainty. Winter is coming, and no one is ready. On September 30, Operation Typhoon begins the final drive on Moscow. Keitel authorizes it with a tight jaw. The numbers are grim. Men lack winter clothing. Fuel reserves are thin. Still, Hitler demands the impossible, and Keitel delivers the order unchanged. Snow falls earlier than expected. Weapons freeze. Frostbite spreads faster than bullets. As temperatures plunge, reports shift tone. Words like delayed and stalled appear. Keitel's signature sits at the bottom of every page. On December 5, Soviet forces launch a massive counteroffensive. Entire German divisions reel backward. Panic flickers through headquarters corridors. Hitler refuses retreat. Keitel conveys the no withdrawal order, even as commanders beg for flexibility. He signs again, and the order holds. No retreat. In December 1941, Wilhelm Keitel watches the Eastern Front contract on the map, while Hitler insists it is stabilizing. Outside Moscow, German units freeze in place, unable to advance, forbidden to fall back. Reports arrive describing rifles that will not fire, fingers that snap off like twigs, men sleeping beside the dead for warmth. Keitel reads every line. He says nothing. On December 12, senior generals argue openly for withdrawal. Keitel stands between them and Hitler like a wall. When tempers flare, he intervenes not to argue strategy, but to enforce obedience. The F-rares must be law. Keitel reminds himself that discipline saved Prussia, saved Germany, saved armies before. Yet this feels different. This feels like denial hardened into command. As winter deepens, losses mount. Entire regiments are reduced to fractions. Soviet ski troops strike supply lines. German horses collapse in the snow. Keitel signs emergency orders for replacements that do not exist. The Reich has no reserve for this kind of war. He knows it. He signs anyway. On January 8, 1942, Hitler appoints himself commander-in-chief of the army. Keitel stands rigid during the announcement. The professional officer corps is effectively sidelined. From this moment, the war is personal. Keitel's role becomes even narrower translator of Hitler's instincts into military commands. Each signature binds him tighter. Privately, cracks appear. Keitel develops stomach pains, insomnia, tremors in his hands. He hides them well. His staff sees only the posture, the pressed uniform, the unfailing salute. In his quarters, he removes his gloves and studies his fingers, wondering how much longer they will obey him. Spring brings mud, not relief. The front stabilizes, but at horrific cost. Keitel helps plan Case Blue. The summer 1942 offensive aimed south, toward oil and the Volga. He understands the gamble. He also understands the risk of saying no. When Hitler dictates the plan, Keitel signs without amendment. Again, as German forces drive toward Stalingrad, Keitel receives reports of civilian massacres in occupied territories. Einsatzgruppen tallies arrive with clinical precision numbers, places, dates. Keitel does not write objections. He does not intervene. His silence is total. By November 1942, the impossible happens. The Sixth Army is encircled at Stalingrad. Paulus requests permission to break out. Keitel carries the request to Hitler. The answer is immediate: hold fast. Keitel returns with the order. His voice does not betray doubt. Weeks pass. Airlift fails. Ammunition runs low. Men starve. Keitel signs communiques promising relief that will never arrive. On February 2, 1943, Paula surrenders. 90,000 German soldiers go into captivity. Keitel reads the report alone. That night, he does not sleep. He understands what Stalingrad means. Not just militarily but morally. The lie of obedience is collapsing under its own weight. Stalingrad does not end the war, but it changes its temperature. From this point forward, everything is colder, harder, more desperate. Wilhelm Keitel feels it immediately in the briefings. Voices lower, optimism disappears. Maps are no longer covered with arrows, but with warnings, red lines, emergency notes. Hitler refuses to accept defeat. In February 1943, he speaks of betrayal of weak generals, of destiny still unfulfilled. Keitel listens, nodding when expected. Inside, something has shifted. Not rebellion, never that, but a dull, growing awareness that obedience has become a trap with no exit. As the Eastern Front recoils, Keitel signs orders restructuring shattered units. Divisions that exist only on paper are declared combat ready. Boys and old men are folded into formations. Meant to stop the Red Army, Keitel knows the reality. He has seen the strength reports. He signs anyway. In March, German forces counterattack at Kharkov. For a moment, success returns. Manstein stabilizes the front. Hitler is energized. Keitel is relieved but only briefly. He understands that one tactical victory cannot erase Stalingrad. It only delays the reckoning. Plans form for a massive summer offensive. Kursk, the largest armored battle ever conceived. Keitel reviews the documents late into the night. He sees the risks clearly. Soviet defenses in depth, minefields, reserves waiting. He suggests delay, cautiously, indirectly. Hitler rejects it instantly. The Führer wants a decisive blow. Keitel folds the papers and prepares the final orders. July 5, 1943, Kursk erupts. Thousands of tanks collide. The ground shakes. Reports flood in losses on a scale the Wehrmacht can no longer replace. Keitel stands at Hitler's side as optimism drains away hour by hour. Soviet counteroffensives smash through weakened sectors. The initiative is gone, permanently. After Kursk, the war becomes defensive. Keitel helps draft scorched earth directives as German forces withdraw. Bridges destroyed, crops burned, civilians displaced. He tells himself it is military necessity. The words feel emptier each time. At headquarters, tension turns inward. Assassination plots whisper through corridors. Keitel hears fragments, never full names. Loyalty tightens around him like armor. He reports nothing, asks nothing. Survival now depends on invisibility. In June 1944, the Western Front collapses. Norman, Allied forces pour into France. Keitel is present when Hitler rages against reality itself. Reserves are sent too late. Counterattacks fail. On July 20, the bomb explodes at the Wolf's Lair. Keitel is nearby. The blast throws him to the ground. Smoke fills the room. For a moment, silence reigns. Hitler survives. Others do not. Keitel staggers to his feet, shaken but alive. Within hours, he helps organize the purge. Loyalty demands it. That night, he watches officers hang by piano wire. Men he has known for decades. He does not intervene. He signs the orders. After July 1944, time accelerates. The war no longer unfolds, it collapses. Wilhelm Keitel feels it in the tempo of orders. In the way, maps are updated twice, then 3 times a day. The fronts are no longer lines. They are gaps. In the east, the Red Army surges forward with overwhelming force. Operation Bagration annihilates Army Group Center. Entire German formations vanish in weeks. Keitel receives casualty summaries that read like obituaries for an army. He signs emergency redeployment orders. Shifting divisions that exist mostly on paper, there is nothing left to maneuver. In the west, Paris falls. Allied armor pushes toward the German border. Keitel stands beside. Hitler, as the Führer, insists on counterattacks that never materialize. The Ardennes offensive is planned in desperation. Keitel understands the gamble immediately: no air superiority, no fuel, no reserves. Yet when Hitler dictates the plan, Keitel signs. Loyalty has long since replaced judgment. December 1944. The last German offensive fails in snow and fire. Keitel watches the reports come in: fuel shortages, stalled columns, shattered units. He does not react. He has learned that reaction changes nothing. By January 1945, the Red Army reaches the Oder. Berlin is now within artillery range. Keitel moves with Hitler into the Führerbunker. The air is stale. The corridors are narrow. There are no windows. The Reich is underground, literally and figuratively. Inside the bunker, Keitel's world shrinks to briefings, whispers, and fear. Hitler rages against generals who no longer exist, armies that have already surrendered, maps that lie. Keitel stands rigid, delivering updates he knows are meaningless. When asked for solutions, he offers none. There are none left. Orders continue. Boys are ordered to fight tanks. Civilians are told to hold ruins. Keitel signs execution directives for deserters. The paper stack never thins. Each signature feels heavier than the last. On April 20th, Hitler's birthday, Soviet artillery begins to fall on Berlin. The ground shakes. Dust falls from the ceiling. Keitel salutes Hitler one last time. He does not know it yet, but this is the end. Days later, Hitler dictates his final political testament. Keitel is present, silent. When the gunshot echoes through the bunker on April 30, Keitel does not move. There is no expression. Only procedure remains. Admiral Dönitz becomes head of state. Keitel follows him north. The war continues for a few more days, mechanically, senselessly. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrenders in Reims. Keitel is ordered to sign the final capitulation. He hesitates for the first time in years. Then he signs. The war is over, but for Wilhelm Keitel, something else is just beginning. The ink dries. Silence fills the room. Wilhelm Keitel rises from the surrender table. Knowing the uniform he still wears no longer protects him. Within hours, he is a prisoner. The deference is gone. Orders are replaced by instructions. He follows them automatically. Obedience, even now, is reflex. He is flown west under guard, then driven through ruined cities he once commanded to be destroyed. Civilians stare. Some curse. Others are too tired to react. Keitel keeps his eyes forward. He does not speak. The war has ended, but its weight has not lifted. In captivity, routine returns: questioning, paperwork, waiting. Allied officers address him without ceremony. They ask about orders, signatures, chains of command. Keitel answers carefully, precisely. He insists he was a soldier, that he followed lawful authority, that he had no choice. The words are familiar. He has used them for years. By autumn 1945, he is transferred to Nuremberg. The Palace of Justice looms intact amid rubble. Keitel is issued headphones, documents, a seat behind glass. He studies the courtroom as if it were another briefing room. Flags replace maps. Judges replace generals. The structure is different. The pressure is the same. When the charges are read: crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity, Keitel stiffens. His name is attached to documents projected on screens. Orders he signed. Dates he remembers. Places he never visited. The room listens as his obedience is translated into evidence. Witnesses testify. Survivors speak of massacres, of deportations, of executions carried out under directives bearing Keitel's signature. He watches, expression fixed. Inside, defenses rise. He tells himself again, he was not there. He did not pull triggers. He did not choose targets. He signed. During breaks, Keitel sits alone, staring at his hands. They look smaller, now, frailer, he remembers. How easily they once moved across paper, how final each stroke had been. He wonders too late whether refusal had ever truly been impossible. His defense rests on duty, on hierarchy, on the idea that disobedience would have meant death. Prosecutors dismantle it methodically. They show examples of officers who resisted, who delayed, who refused. Some survived. Some did not. Choice, they argue, always existed. Keitel takes the stand. His voice is steady. He admits the signatures. He denies intent. He speaks of loyalty, of oath, of soldierly honor. The courtroom listens in silence. No one interrupts. No one applauds. As weeks pass, the narrative tightens around him. The man who once transmitted power now absorbs judgment. He begins to understand that obedience itself is on trial, that following orders is no longer an answer, but the crime. The verdict approaches. Keitel senses it in the air, the same way he once sensed an offensive about to begin. Only this time, there will be no orders to sign, no authority to hide behind, only the consequence of a lifetime of obedience. Judgment arrives without ceremony. On October 1, 1946, Wilhelm Keitel stands as the verdict is read. Guilty on all counts. The words land with clinical precision. No raised voices, no drama, just finality. Keitel does not react. He has spent a lifetime receiving orders. This one, at last, is directed at him. Death by hanging. The sentence echoes in his mind long after the courtroom empties. In his cell, Keitel sits on a narrow cot and stares at the wall. He thinks of rank, of protocol, and how carefully everything in his life was structured. Even now, the machinery of justice feels familiar. Another system, another chain of command. The difference is simple. There is no appeal to authority left. In the days that follow, Keitel writes letters. They are restrained, formal, almost bureaucratic. He asks forgiveness from his family. He maintains, to the end, that he acted as a soldier, that he served Germany, that he never sought cruelty. The words are neat, controlled. They do not erase anything. Guards escort him through corridors once more. He walks slowly now. His posture is still upright, but age and defeat have hollowed him. Other condemned men pass him in silence. There is no camaraderie, no speeches. Each carries his own reckoning. On the night before the execution, Keitel sleeps little. He hears distant footsteps, doors opening, doors closing, sounds that remind him of headquarters corridors long ago. For the first time, he allows himself a thought he never permitted during the war. I could have said no. Morning comes early. October 16, 1946. Keitel is led to the execution chamber. The gallows stands stark under bright lights. Everything is efficient, measured, official. He is asked for final words. I followed orders, he says. The statement hangs in the air, unfinished, insufficient. There is nothing more to add. The hood is placed. The trapdoor opens. The body falls. And with it, the last illusion that obedience absolves responsibility. The gallows are dismantled before dawn. By sunrise, Wilhelm Keitel's body is gone, cremated. The ashes scattered in secret. No grave, no marker. The state erases him the way it erases defeated symbols. But the paper trail remains. Orders, signatures, carbon, copies that outlive the man. In Germany, the silence is thick. Cities lie broken. Families search for names that will never return. Few speak of Keitel. Fewer mourn him. To most, he is not a soldier, but a shadow. One of many who made catastrophe possible without ever firing a shot. Among historians and soldiers, his name becomes shorthand. Lair Keitel, the obedient one, the man who never said no. His career is dissected in staff colleges. His decisions reduced to lessons. Authority without conscience. Loyalty without restraint. The cost of silence. Documents from the trial circulate. Young officers read them years later, noting how often Keitel deferred, how rarely he resisted. They trace the path from his desk to execution sites thousands of kilometers away. The distance does not absolve him. It defines him. The Eastern Front, which consumed millions, becomes the core of that judgment. Barbarossa, Moscow, Stalingrad, Kursk. Each disaster carries Keitel's signature somewhere in its chain of command, not as architect, not as strategist, but as enabler. Keitel never commanded an army in battle. He commanded paperwork, and paperwork, in the Third Reich, killed efficiently. Survivors of the camps and occupied territories do not remember his face. They remember the results. orders arriving, trucks coming at dawn, shots in forests, silence afterward. Keitel's defense that he was distant, removed collapses under the weight of consequence. In the years that follow, Germany rebuilds. New uniforms are issued, new oaths written. One sentence is repeated again and again. I was only following orders is no longer a defense. It is a warning. Keitel's life becomes a case study in how power truly works, not through shouting dictators alone, but through quiet men who sign, transmit, and comply. Men who value belonging over judgment, stability over morality. There is no redemption arc, no final realization spoken aloud, only a record, clear, complete, unforgiving. And yet, the story does not end with his death, because the systems that shaped Wilhelm Keitel are not unique to one country, one war, one uniform. They exist wherever obedience is prized above responsibility. The question he avoided until the end now belongs to everyone who studies his life. Where does duty end and guilt begin? The legacy settles slowly, not like an explosion, but like dust on archives, on classrooms, on the quiet language of law. Wilhelm Keitel is gone, but his presence lingers wherever responsibility is discussed and avoided. His name surfaces in footnotes, in judgments, in the pauses between sentences spoken by those who study power. In the years after the trials, former soldiers speak carefully. Some admit fear, some insist on necessity. Many echo Keitel's defense without naming him. Orders came from above. Refusal meant death. The logic is familiar. It is also incomplete. Historians pull files that show alternatives, delays, quiet sabotage, selective disobedience, not heroism, just resistance measured in moments. Keitel's career is examined again, this time without uniforms or salutes. His promotions reveal a pattern: reliability over insight, compliance over competence. Hitler did not trust Keitel to win wars. He trusted him to obey. That distinction matters. It explains everything that followed. The Eastern Front becomes the central exhibit, not only because of its scale, but because of its brutality. Barbarossa was not merely a military operation. It was a war of annihilation, formalized through orders Keitel transmitted without alteration. Commissar order, reprisal directives, scorched earth. Each required an administrative signature before it reached the front. Each found one. Keitel's private life leaves little trace. No diaries confessing doubt. No letters revealing rebellion. What remains are habits, deference, caution, fear of isolation. He belonged to a generation trained to equate loyalty with virtue. When faced with a leader who demanded everything, that training became fatal. In post-war Germany, this understanding shapes doctrine. The concept of Veneer F. the soldier as a citizen, with conscience emerges in direct opposition to men like Keitel. Command is redefined. Obedience is bounded. The lesson is institutionalized because the cost of forgetting is too high. Yet outside Germany, the story resonates just as sharply. Militaries, governments, corporations all examine the same dilemma under different names. At what point does following instructions become participation? Where does personal responsibility begin? Keitel never answered that question. He deferred it, again and again, until history answered for him. The verdict at Nuremberg did not just condemn actions. It condemned a mindset. The quiet man behind the desk, the signature without protest, the belief that morality can be delegated upward. As the record closes, there is no catharsis, no balance restored, only clarity. The machinery of power depends on people like Wilhelm Keitel, not monsters, not fanatics, but functionaries who refuse to stop the machine. And that realization is the most unsettling legacy of all, because it means the story is not safely buried in the past. It waits wherever obedience is easier than judgment. There is no final image of Wilhelm Keitel standing at attention, no battlefield where his story can be neatly contained. His war ends not with gunfire, but with documentation pages filed, evidence catalogued, judgments archived. The quiet conclusion suits him. He was never meant to be seen. What remains is absence, a space where decisions should have been challenged, a silence where resistance might have slowed the machinery. Keitel's life demonstrates how catastrophes, do not require passion at every level, only compliance. In the last review of his record, nothing is missing. Orders are intact. Chains of command are clear. Responsibility flows cleanly from desk to ditch, from signature to consequence. The system functioned exactly as designed. That is the indictment. The men who trusted Keitel did so because he never surprised them. He never hesitated publicly. He never forced confrontation. In a regime built on absolutism, that predictability was invaluable. It kept the gears aligned. It kept the war moving forward long after it should have collapsed. The Eastern Front, where the story began, now fields and forests again. Snow still falls where armies once froze. Rivers run where bridges were blown apart. The land absorbs history better than people do. It does not argue. It remembers quietly. In archives, Keitel's name appears thousands of times, rarely alone, always attached to others. Orders countersigned, directives forwarded. He is present everywhere, yet nowhere fully accountable in the moment until the end. That is why his story endures, not because of who he was, but because of what he represents. The comfortable distance between decision and outcome. The belief that intent matters more than effect. The hope that structure can replace conscience. No speeches follow. No music resolves the tension. The questions remain deliberately unanswered, because history did not answer them cleanly either. It recorded them, it judged them, and it left the responsibility with those who came after. Somewhere, a hand hovers above a document. A command waits to be passed along. A choice appears ordinary. This is where Wilhelm Keitel's story truly ends. Not on the gallows, not in the bunker, not in the courtroom, but in that moment. The moment obedience asks to be signed, and conscience decides whether it will.